Hello, and welcome back to the summer series by Inspiring Workplaces in partnership with H&H. It's our fourth year now, which also means 4 years out of the start of the pandemic, so every year it gets a little bit better. And we've decided to revamp the format, both to bring you more stories every day, but in a shorter, more succinct time frame of 1 week instead of a story every day over 2 weeks. We've also done that to protect the team a little bit because it's quite hard work doing a story a day for 2.5 weeks like we've been doing for the past 3 years. So we hope you enjoy the new format, twice as much every single day, an hour a day at the same time for the next 5 days. We offer all our content, our community, our events, all for free because we want to help you change the world through the world of work. That's our mission. And we will do anything, or almost anything, I should probably say, in our power to try and help you do that too. We have a lot of updates from Inspiring Workplaces, but I'm going to save them until further into the week because I'm just very excited about the two storytellers we have today and the stories they're going to share, and just want to get started, as I'm sure you do too. So, to our first storyteller, he's a 2-time Sunday Times bestseller, and in my opinion, and only my opinion, he's fearless with the content he puts out there and the debate he encourages to drive real change. His talk today is on resisting the return to the office, why we're getting the in-office debate wrong. I don't really want to give any more away than that, and rather just welcome to the stage Bruce Daisley. How are you? Welcome. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thanks for involving me in the summer series. Is it summer? Well, remind me, it's summerish.
It should be summer somewhere. Just not, I think, either where you or I are. So, but yeah, like I say, I'd love to just leave you to it and let you share your opinions.
Fabulous. I'm going to go through my slides today. I've actually just added something else to the presentation set, which is a QR code. So I'll show that at the end, and that allows you to take a look at my slides and download my slides. So I'm going to sort of present now, but I'm also going to give you the chance to download my slides afterwards. And that's specifically because there's a few things I'm going to show you that have got data in them or have got articles in them that I think it's possible you might want to read, or you might want to challenge my perspective and challenge my take on that. So let me dive in. And today's chat really is just, I think, about this theme that is persisting, which is the constant sense that some of our bosses want us to reflect and maybe embark upon a return to the office. And you know, the reason why I say that is I deal with teams all the time. I often have culture discussions with senior leadership teams at organizations, and one of the things that they often articulate to me is that they want the team back in the office more. They don't think that the way they're working at the moment is producing great results. That is probably partly enhanced by the fact that we're in something of an economic downturn, that times are difficult. So let me go in and reflect on this moment and where we are right now. So look, the first thing I'd say is that there's two simultaneous truths about the way that we're working right now. And the first is that workplace culture feels more fragmented than ever before. And simultaneously, flexibility is the most popular innovation to happen to work really in the last 50 years. And you know, it's barely any point going much beyond that. Let me show you two other data points that I think reflect this moment and partly capture those themes. The first is that you might have seen about 10 months ago, there was a piece of work done by KPMG, international work. So this is the UK cut on it, but broadly the numbers are the same, whichever country you look at. 2/3 of chief execs think that we're going to end up by 2028. So what's that? Another 4 years' time, we're going to end up in a 5-day office. So, you know, really critical that they think this isn't working right now. That first point that I made, that senior leaders don't think that workplace culture is as cohesive or as energized as it previously was. the second thing to juxtapose against that is that 90% of workers don't want to go back to the way things were. So I think sort of taking that first slide and re-looking at it here, you can see that we've got this situation where there's a schism between what bosses think is working right now and how workers are feeling. And look, why are workers feeling like that? I saw this fabulous commencement speech, probably by the sort of Charles Dickens of television. If you watch shows like Bridgerton or Scandal or How to Get Away with Murder, you probably have read the name Shonda Rhimes, who is the showrunner, the producer for those shows. And she did a fabulous commencement speech where she was talking about her own life, actually. And she said, every time you see me succeeding at something, somewhere you can't see, I'm failing at something else. Every time you see me winning, I'm losing somewhere else. Really interesting sort of framing. She says that, every time you see me on stage at the Emmys collecting an award, or every time you see me, you see photographs of me turning up for the last recording of Sandra Oh, the star of Grey's Anatomy. What you're missing is I didn't turn up to my mother's carer appointment, or I wasn't there for my child's soccer tournament. And it's a reflection that all of us have got this sort of conflict running through our lives, that we feel that we've got more commitments than we can live up to. And so I think the reason why 90% of workers don't want to go back to the way that things were before is that we all, to some extent, think that we've got some more balance to our work-life blend. We've succeeded a little bit more by the fact that flexibility has come along. But let's sort of reflect on where this has left us. And like I say, I'm going to give you a link to all the slides in a second. And one of the things you'll see is a link to this article that was about 4 weeks ago in the Wall Street Journal. The article link, if you come to the slide afterwards, is going to be on that thing there that says article link. And this article is a truly fabulous read because I think it tries to capture the sort of the moment of work we're in right now. The moment we're in of work right now. This article is called "The Loneliness of the American Worker," and sort of worth contextualizing it. Firstly, that by contextualizing it, that these figures are reflected in UK workers, in European workers, in wherever you're consuming this. So this isn't exclusively a US thing. Loneliness is a very typical experience of current work, and 40% of UK workers say they don't have a single friend at work. So loneliness of the worker. The interesting thing about this article is I suspect if you sent the headline to your boss, or maybe if you saw this article yourself, you might make a conclusion that, oh yeah, I know what is causing loneliness at work. And I suspect people would jump to the idea that the fact that the workforce now works remotely, that we spend 2 or 3 days away from each other every week, it was the cause of this. The really interesting thing about this, and I think the reason why you'll enjoy reading the article, is that that's not borne out by the data. People who work fully on site all of the time, so people who are in the office or the workplace 5 days a week, are equally as lonely as people who work hybrid or work fully remote. So it's not necessarily the where of work that's causing the problems. There seems to be something else going on. There seems to be something that's creating this sense of loneliness. And I want you sort of just to go on and reflect on that. In fact, on the subject of these themes, you'll find a link to that one there in the notes at the end. This was an article in The Atlantic last week. And I think if we're thinking about the causes of loneliness at the work, this article by Derek Thompson is possibly better at trying to ascribe the responsibility. This article, he says, is called "White Collar Work is Just Meetings Now." And I think that's the critical consideration, because when we look into the experience of work right now, this is data from Microsoft and Nick Bloom. Most workers who work in a hybrid capacity describe their work being made up by 50% of their week is in meetings. And I think if we're going to try and work out why work doesn't feel as connected as before, it's this paradoxical thing that we most of us find our time now being consumed with scheduled meetings. There's no chance interactions, or there's no opportunities just to talk to someone on the go. We spend our times really just going through, as Derek Thompson says, a work that's simply become meetings right now. Look, to put this into numbers, into context, Microsoft say, using their Teams data, that since the start of the pandemic, the amount of time we spend in meetings has gone up threefold. So we've found that work has really been consumed by our calendars. And I think this is a really critical consideration. When I put some of this research out a couple of months ago, the thing that I really tried to emphasize is that if we're trying to fix workplace culture, if we're trying to make work more agreeable, actually we should start with calendars, not with we should think about our calendars. We shouldn't necessarily think about our offices. So it's not necessarily that if a boss is saying we want the team to be in a better place, that we should be thinking about getting the team back into the workplace more, but could we do anything to try and rewind the clock on this, to try and sort of create a more familiar version of work from the past? Look, because one of the things that I hear repeatedly from the teams I work with is one of the challenges with an RTO mandate. One of the challenges of people saying, bosses saying you need to be in the office more. You can have these unstructured water cooler moments. You can have more interactions. People say this to me. I hear this repeatedly. They say, I came into the office and I sat at my desk on Teams calls all day. Really familiar that actually work has become something that maybe when we're trying to diagnose a cure isn't necessarily the version of work that we're imagining and characterizing in our head. I want to give you a couple of pointers, because if we're thinking about how to make work better, there's actually, in some of the data that we've got, there's some really interesting evidence that might give us pointers for how we can fix things. First place I want to start is the role of the manager. Now, really interestingly, if you are interested in workplace research, Gallup publishes an annual global workplace report. Came out, the latest one just came out just at the end of June, so relatively recent data. And this data, they look, I think, at about 120 different countries around the world. You can go in and for free, you can take a look at all of this stuff. And one of the things that they strongly concluded this year was that the role of the manager is largely instrumental in creating our engagement with our jobs. When we're predicting the engagement of workers, 70% of their engagement comes from whether their manager is engaged or not. And one of the things that I think is most critical, we think about workplace engagement, we think about how people can be connected with their jobs. And really interestingly, they found that 80% of the people, 4 out of 5 of the people who were engaged with their job, say that they've received direct feedback from their boss this week. Feeling seen by our bosses and feeling like our bosses are engaged in their job seems to be a really critical component of us feeling engaged in ourselves and our job. Now, of course, when we might be thinking of this and diagnosing this, actually that idea that we maybe jumped to the conclusion that we wanted people back in the office, it doesn't actually seem as relevant as trying to get the management balance right. What's the other thing? Well, the main thing that you're probably familiar with this, the main thing that comes out of the Gallup Global Workplace Report is that the biggest predictor of whether someone is engaged in their job is do they have a close friend at work? I sort of the actual research asks the question, do you have a best friend at work? But some people feel a bit anxious about ascribing someone as their best friend. But do you have a friend at work in some capacity, a sense of connection? And I think actually, if you think about this alongside that research about managers, both of them speak to the same thing. Let me use what I think is a really helpful tool. I often think about this, when we're thinking about that role of a friend, why would having a friend at work matter? I saw this, which is a beautiful articulation of this. It's a description of friendship by a British Irish poet called David Whyte. And it's poetry, so it's going to be a bit floral, but let's have a look. Friendship is the privilege of having been seen by someone and the equal privilege of having been granted the sight of the essence of another. Okay, so it's poetic, but I think there's something really powerful in it, because if we're thinking, why on earth would having a friend at work lead to us feeling more engaged with our job? It goes to the heart of just feeling like our work matters, that we've been seen by someone, that if we've had a bad day, we've got the opportunity to go and talk to someone. But Actually, I think this goes to the heart of that management thing as well. When I said to previously that feeling like someone feels engaged with their job if they've had direct feedback from their boss, well, I guess that feels like people want to feel seen. And I think things go to right to the heart of deep psychological needs. So, look, what would that say? Well, I guess maybe if we were thinking about a previous era of work, then that would have more easily been accomplished when we were in the office. But now we've established that flexible working is one of the most popular things for our team, for retention, for energizing our team. Then probably we need to think about how do we achieve that sense that people feel seen without having to force upon them an hour's commute every morning and an hour's commute every evening. How can we create a sense that people are seen and feel understood and feel connected? And I think, this is sort of the critical lesson about where work is right now. I'm always reminded of this, and I think there's a really critical consideration here that if any of us are trying to create workplace culture typically lives in the gaps between things rather than in scheduled moments. So as calendar and scheduled meetings go up massively, well, don't be surprised if culture seems squeezed out. If you've got members of your team saying that they are in back-to-back meetings all day, they've just had a new training module drop into their inbox, they've got lots of emails, don't be surprised if one of the things that disappears from that is a sense of connection and interaction. Really beautiful research that was done by a group just trying to understand the impact of night work, actually. So there was a piece of work done trying to study the different experiences of warehouse workers who were working in a supermarket warehouse, and railway workers. So, okay, superficially, two very different groups of workers to maybe people working in an office environment. But they just wanted to understand the elements of the job that were having an impact on the sense of purpose, the sense of motivation, the sense of connection that were taking place. And what was really interesting was that the warehouse workers, the supermarket warehouse workers, had headphones on because it was quite a noisy environment. And as a result of that, they were communicated to each other through headphones. The railway workers were out working all night, actually, on railway tracks. But the typical thing that characterized their day is that they frequently sat down and had a coffee break with each other. They sat down once every shift and ate with each other. The really interesting thing, so juxtaposing those two things, what was found though was that the railway workers had a really passionate sense of culture, connection, real strong sense of purpose. They knew that their work was important to getting people to where they needed to be, about keeping the railway safe. Why? Because they were just sitting down and spending that time together. Culture exists in the gaps between things. In contrast, the warehouse workers felt disconnected, lonely, were far more likely to quit, often felt that they was in a sort of state of managed depression, really. They just felt completely isolated from each other. And actually, well, our jobs might be different to that. Recognizing those core elements are really critical. Actually, it's a really interesting exploration into one of the consequences of the 4-day week. One of the consequences of the 4-day week is broadly organizations say you can't just switch on the 4-day week. You need to transition to it. You need to some extent, sort of rebalance how work is constructed. If you're going to try and achieve as much in 4 days as you did in 5, you just can't simply presume that the same practices will get there. And one of the things that people talk about for going to the 4-day week is they say work intensity goes up. And one of the things that's pushed out is socialization. So it's really interesting, like holistically, 4-day week might be better for our lives. It might be better for society. But for work cohesion, you need to work a little bit harder to try and keep that sense of social connection. I think it's a really vital lesson. All of this is to say that when we're talking about how work things, we need to understand holistically how it all works. The other thing to emphasize, while we're on the point of things living in the gaps, is that imagination lives in the gaps. And specifically what I mean by this is that if you're the sort of person who finds yourself in back-to-back meetings all day, or your whole schedule is just jam-packed with calendar demands on you, you probably won't be as creative and as imaginative as maybe you believe that you're capable of. And there's just lovely examples of this. If we were going to do sort of a rudimentary exercise in neuroscience, one of the things that we'd conclude is that the brain has three systems of cognition, but the one that seems to be most attuned with our sense of imagination and creativity is what's sometimes styled the default network. It's when we're in a state of boredom, and you know, you might find yourself thinking you always have your best ideas when you're staring out of a window or walking the dog or waiting for the kettle to boil. And in fact, there's really good evidence of that. My favorite example of that is a guy called Aaron Sorkin, who's a screenwriter. He realized he was having all his best ideas in the shower. And it's just a good example. He says he takes 6 to 8 showers a day, but it's just a good example of a lot of magic exists in the gaps between things. If you find yourself scheduling too much, you might find that some of the magic of work and workplace culture and your own imagination is forced out. So look, you know, how might we think about this? Well, I'm coming to the end of my discussion here, but you know, it's a real strong manifesto for aggressively reducing meeting time. And look, you know, in the slides, if you download them afterwards, you'll see this evidence. This is a lovely piece of work that was done by researchers in the UK and France. They took 80 organizations, had to have at least 1,000 employees each, and they tracked them when they introduced 1 meeting-free day and 2 meeting-free days. And what you'll find in the data there is that 1 meeting-free day saw an increase in productivity and an increase in engagement, and people's levels of stress went down. In fact, the only thing better than a meeting-free day was 2 meeting-free days. And I think if any of us are sort of trying to manage the way that work is constructed right now, the mistake we might make is thinking we need to be back in the office more. Actually, rethinking our relationship with our calendars is probably a far more potent way to think about being intentional about designing work. From our own perspective, maybe if you can't introduce a meeting-free day, one thing that a lot of people have found is that scheduling a 1-hour meeting with yourself, a monk mode, where you have no interruptions, no distractions, and you try and get work done. People have found that ability to focus and get work done seems to put them in a far more productive and present frame of mind. So let me just put if I can switch to the other slide, but feel free to download this. You can either get the slides by going to the URL tinyurl.com/inspiring-b, or you can go to that QR code and you'll be able to get all of my slides there. So if there are any data points that you feel you just want to double tap into that, or maybe you want to read that Wall Street Journal article, you'll find all of that there. What's the point I'd make then? I think, you know, we are very much in a moment where discussions about return to office mandates feel timely, feel like they're being brought back to the agenda by senior leaders. And the only thing I would strongly emphasize is that to some extent, we've also got to recognize in the last 5 years is not only have we got the massive dividend of working flexibly, but meeting time has trebled. As Derek Thompson says, office jobs principally now have become meetings. If we want to reinvent our work, thinking about that rather than where the work is done is actually the most productive thing to do. Reinventing workplace culture right now is about calendars, not about buildings.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Bruce. A lot to unpack there, and I'm very grateful that you've shared the QR code for those that want to download the slides. I think the theme that really came through at the end for me was obviously one of those words that sprung up in the past year or two is the intentionality. So if it is going to be about calendars and, you know, monk mode, giving people the space in the gaps. I've been reading a book recently you wouldn't think to look to, but Arnold Schwarzenegger. You mentioned Aaron Sorkin, but he's talking about, you know, he's quite a successful guy, really. And you look through everything he's achieved. And one of the things I was reading only yesterday was giving yourself space. So, and he then talks about walking the dog or whatever works for you. So Sorkin's a shower. Seinfeld had a notepad by the side of his bed because that's where all his jokes came up when he was sleeping. So, but I think being able to work out what works well for your team and give them space and be intentional about it, I think sounds like a very, very good place to start. And reframing it, like you just said, from calendars to return to office, you know, lot springing off in my head now. So yeah, I really appreciate the talk, and I will be putting this out on demand as well. So for those that want to watch it and come back to it and keep watching it. So really, really appreciate it, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Appreciate it. Thank you.